Most of the world stood in lockstep with Israel after the attacks on October the 7th. Anyone with a shred of humanity has condemned those attacks for what they were, a barbaric terrorist massacre of innocent people and the biggest slaughter of Jewish people since the Holocaust. But more than 2 weeks on, with grief now turned to anger, Israel is facing difficult questions of its own. Almost 6,000 people in Gaza have been reportedly killed, according to the Hamas-run authorities. That death toll will surely soar with any ground invasion, and those of us who had the basic human compassion to be sickened by October the 7th should also be horrified by the loss of innocent lives in Gaza too. President Macron of France visited Israel today and said this.
The fight must be merciless, but not without rules, because we are democracies which fight against terrorists.
Well, he's right. Rules matter. They're what separate the enlightened world from the terrorists who want to rip it apart. Targeting civilians, as Hamas did, is a war crime. But how can Israel invade Gaza to remove Hamas without killing many, many civilians? Hamas is merciless. Hamas sees death as the beginning, not the end. Hamas makes martyrs of its dead. They won't hesitate to use its own civilians as human shields. They're firing rockets from the grounds of schools, mosques, UN buildings. Gaza is a labyrinth of tunnels with families packed into cities like sardines. How can Israel possibly invade Gaza while maintaining the distinction between civilians and combatants, which it must do under humanitarian law? How far can Israel go before it loses international support? When will it allow proper aid to Palestinian civilians? How can Israel invade without jeopardizing the lives of the hostages who are still trapped? Well, today, 2 more of those hostages were released. I don't buy the spin from those now vaunting how well the hostages say they were treated. Hamas seized these innocent people from their homes and held them as prisoners while slaughtering 1,500 others. They're nothing more than bargaining chips now in its sick conquest. I fully support Israel removing every last trace of Hamas. But even if it succeeds in doing that, there will only be more questions. What happens to Gaza after that? Israel could wage a war to decapitate Hamas and leave Gaza in total ruins, relying on neighbours it doesn't trust to pick up the pieces. It could occupy and repress Gaza, sowing the seeds for a new wave of hate. It could reinstall the toothless Palestinian Authority, which runs the West Bank, even though for years it's propped up Hamas precisely to keep the Palestinians divided. As former President Obama warned today, some of Israel's actions now could harden Palestinian attitudes for generations and erode global support for Israel. I'll be the first to admit I don't have all the answers to these incredibly difficult questions. Israel undoubtedly faces an existential threat. Hamas wants to kill as many Jewish people as it can, all of them, if it could. So Israel must defend itself. I know it cannot sacrifice the region's stability and breed the next generation of terrorists either in the process of that defence.